All right, welcome back to Leadership Rules, where we believe leadership isn't just a role, it's a way of life. So whether you're leading a team, a community, or simply leading yourself, we're here to help you unlock the rules to lead your life with purpose and impact. I'm Nick Caniglio, joined by my co-host Marnie Stockman, and together we co-authored Lead It Like Lasso and The Business of You. And today we're thrilled to have Scott Martin on the show with us.
Yeah, we are. So Scott Martin is one of those leaders who lives really at the intersection of character, leadership, and learning. Doctor, educator, researcher, and practitioner who's spent years helping people and organizations think more deeply about how leadership actually develops, and is the executive director of the Odyssey Leadership Academy, which has some really cool elements to it we'll dig into today. So Scott, welcome to Leadership Rules.
Hey, thank you guys. It's great to be here. Excited to be a part of this. Excited to speak to your community and just share a little bit about what we're doing here at OLA.
Yeah,
awesome.
I can't wait to hear. But like we do with most of our guests, we start with something we call Biscuits with the Boss from our Ted Lasso days. So real quick, some rapid fire questions. Just speak what comes to your mind first. Yep. So first question is, first concert, best concert?
Man, it's funny. I was just talking to one of our administrators this morning. I'm not a big concert goer. But I'm also from Oklahoma, so probably the best concert and one of the few I've attended is Garth Brooks.
Oh,
that's high rent there. That's a good one.
I thought you were going to say the show Oklahoma. That would have been.
No, I actually got to see the show Oklahoma in Wales one time when I was studying in Oxford. I went to Wales, and that was what was showing in this little tiny town called Aberystwyth. And I went up to the guy at the end of it who was playing the main character. And I said, I just want you to know I'm from Oklahoma. And he's, oh, did I get the accent right? I'm like, well, I don't know. But anyway, no.
That's awesome. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee.
All right. Dog or cat?
Dog.
If you were going to read a book, paper, audio, or digital?
Paper.
Yeah, you and me both.
You can see, just a small portion of my library behind me.
That's how I work.
That's perfect. All right. Last question, a little bit harder. Leadership, more art or science?
Yeah, it's both, right? It has to be both. And you're building on the science of a whole host of different things. And I'm really fascinated on things like the science of hope, the science of gratitude, what Brene Brown does with the science of vulnerability. So there's a whole really kind of new scientific research coming out on all of those things that I think are super important to leadership, but it's also an art. It's a craft. It's something that operates within kind of this nebulous space that's really hard to get your hands around at times. You just kind of know it when you see it, and you know it when you're in it. But it also requires a lot of skill. It requires a lot of kind of returning back to those basics so that you are learning from the things, the mistakes you've made, the mistakes of others have made. And I think there's a big difference between leadership and management. And I think one of those biggest differences is that the leader suffers on behalf of their community. I think you can manage an organization, you can manage a retail store, a whole host of things, and you'll have hard days and you'll have difficult days, and you'll have things that come up. But I think the leader bears a woundedness on behalf of their organization, on behalf of their community, on behalf of the people in their care. And I think that's another trait of leadership, is that they recognize that they are in that role to care for other people. And I think that's a big difference between a leader and a manager. A manager might care about the spreadsheet and the bottom line and, profit margins and those things. And those are all fine. I'm not discounting those. But I think when you're talking about leadership, there is a woundedness in leadership that's different. And so it's art, it's science, it's relational. There's just a lot that's, I think, wrapped up in that. And again, sometimes it's difficult to put labels on it, but you sure know when you're looking at a leader, and you know when you're being managed. And I think there's a key difference in there.
So first, I have to say you beat me. That was probably the fastest we got to one of our favorite authors dropped in the podcast, don't you think, Nick, with Brene Brown? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well done. Well, when you and I were talking before, you talk a lot about flourishing, right? And I think that's something you talk about, how to create flourishing for both the staff and students in a school. So when you walk into a school, what's the first sign that tells you whether people are actually flourishing or floundering or just surviving, however you term it?
That's a great question, Marnie. I actually just did my latest edition of the Insightful Educator newsletter and YouTube channel that I have. I just talked about how you can regulate, how the leader is the one who regulates the central nervous system of the organization. So for me, the organization is a school. And so organizations have central nervous systems just like we do. And you can just feel it. You can feel it when you walk in. If there's an energy, if there's a buzz, if there's excitement, if there's hope, if there's purpose, if there's passion. And if you walk into a classroom, you can feel it. If you walk into a break room, you can feel it. And honestly, I've said for a long time, the best way to know how well a school is doing is hang out in the teacher break room. Because if it's complaining and criticism and negativity, and Johnny did this and Susan did that, and they're just kind of waiting to get out the door at the minute that last bell rings, then you can tell that's probably a place that doesn't have that flourishing rooted in it. But if you walk in the break room and they're celebrating students, they're shouting out what's going on in the classroom, they're inviting you to come and see, they're sharing, Susan was doing this in my class and now they're doing this there. If you're at the lunchroom and you see teachers, a lot of times the teacher will be huddled over in a corner doing their own thing. But if you could go to a place and you see teachers who are sitting down at the tables talking to students about whatever it was in class or the football games or what happened in the drama production, what happened in JV softball, you can just tell in a place, and it doesn't take long before you realize the nervous system. Another word I really like to use is ecosystem. The ecosystem of this place is healthy, it's flourishing, it's thriving, or the ecosystem in this place is really fraught, it's anxious, it's stressed out, it's hypercritical, it's nervous, it's unhealthy. And so I love that distinction of flourishing rather than successful. You can have a really successful place and it be a place where everybody's stressed out, and a lot of turnover in faculty, a lot of turnover in staff, but yet somehow we're hitting these, whatever the metrics are. To me, I want a place that's flourishing. I want a place where the people are deeply rooted, where the people have freedom to be their most authentic selves, where they can fail forward and not feel like that's a problem, where they understand that there's a growth mindset at play. So I just feel like that word flourishing is a lot. It just encapsulates a lot more than just successful. Again, you can have an extremely successful organization and it not be flourishing internally. And so that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, and I love hearing that. And I was gonna ask you a question, Scott, about a lot of educators that we end up speaking with on our podcast and feeling stuck or burnt out. But since you've kind of turned the tables a little bit on the whole notion of flourishing versus successful, and I would say versus even being burnt out, I would presume that at the Odyssey Leadership Academy, you have a feeling like you've created an environment where folks are flourishing. Is that correct, number one? And number two, assuming it is, what were the keys to kind of building up this academy to getting into that position?
I would think, now you're talking to the used car salesman, but I would think that we had our accreditation audit, I think it was last year or the year before, and we sent out a survey of a whole host of things to all the stakeholders, to students, to parents, to faculty, 1 through 5. 1 is, this is the worst place I've ever been. 5 is, this is nirvana and I love being here. We got nothing lower than a 4 on any of those things. So the data, and just walking through the space, I had a group of educators come last semester and they just said, how can we get our school to feel this kind? And I want to say that's probably at the root of it, is that there's just an overwhelming sense of kindness. So I would think, yes, to answer your first question, I would say it's flourishing. I think our faculty feel that, our families and students, I think, feel that. But why is it flourishing? Is because we intentionally put that as our North Star. That is what we are walking towards every day. It's what we've been walking towards every single day since our founding. We're unapologetic about that. Yes, we want students who are academically successful. We want students who are putting their minds to use, but also their hearts, their hands. We want fully embodied agency in what we do. We give students a lot of voice and choice. There's a lot of agency for our students and for our faculty. It's a place that dignifies the entire person. And so the difference to us is when you have flourishing as your North Star, you know what you're going to say no to, and we will say no to the things that are that don't walk us that way. And I'll give you a big one. We don't give a single grade, whether it's an A or an F or a GPA, to any student ever. That's been part of our DNA from the beginning. That's part of our commitment to our North Star of human flourishing. The research on that is pretty clear, that causes a lot of stress and anxiety, which leads to depression and isolation, self-harm, etc. So we just say, if it's toxic to kids, we're not going to do it. So that's just one way that we have committed to say flourishing is our North Star. It's our reason for being. And we can wrap a whole lot of other things into that. Academic excellence, college admission stuff is sky high. Our students are getting into their top schools of choice on significant scholarships. But that is not necessarily the thing we're moving towards. We're moving towards flourishing. And I think that just shows up in everything we do. So when I go talk to other schools, the number one thing I say is, what's your North Star? And I get a lot of the same conversation. Well, college and career readiness. Okay, great. But how does that walk itself out in terms of the lived experience of the student in it? And it kind of walks itself out in stress and anxiety and isolation, lack of community and lack of belonging and not feeling like you matter, and on and on. So what we have found is if you put flourishing as your North Star, you can still get, whether it's college, whether it's career, whatever the trajectory is, but you just get really healthy, robust, well-rounded human beings who are going to do those things. So it was a very intentional creating of an ecosystem that fosters that flourishing from the beginning.
So when Nick and we go on a lot of podcasts about our book, Lead It Like Lasso, and folks will ask us what's different about the leadership book, aside from the fact that it's based on a fictional TV show and it still gets the job done. But one of the things that we always talk about is that we lead with core value and culture, whereas a lot of leadership books and frameworks start with vision and mission, which is, to your point, that's where they're putting the tactical KPIs, performance indicators, school-based, whatever improvement plans around something other than the core value and culture. And since culture is how the core values play out, like you said, you've really defined the culture of flourishing, or the core value of flourishing, but you've really spelled out exactly what that looks like in terms of behaviors and what it doesn't look like. So when schools try to transform culture to flourishing, where are they accidentally starting with school improvement plans and the wrong kinds of metrics? And how do you get them leaning toward the flourishing piece?
That's a great question. Well, okay. So I think a lot of it, how do they intersect with me is one of the answers to that, because, that's what I'm preaching night and day. And so I can just tell you from my experience, when people reach out to me, it's typically because one of two things, and it may be the same train on two different tracks, but they themselves really want, and this is why we get into education, we really want to see human beings flourish. I don't know that anybody really gets into education to say, I really want to fill out a bunch of data metrics. We get into it because something has broken.
Some IEPs, yeah.
Well, something has broken my heart open to lead me into this field in the first place. Or I could be an accountant, or I could be a real estate agent, or there's a whole host of things I could do besides education. I really believe that the educator is someone whose heart's been broken open in a way that they say, I want to go help bring hope and healing and purpose and meaning and flourishing to others in their critical years of formation. So there's a calling almost that is on the educator that I think is really pretty unique in the field of vocations and jobs. So all that to say, a school leader who comes to me because they are longing and yearning to see their community flourish and thrive. They want students who love to be there. They want faculty who love to be there. And there's a gap somewhere. So between this vision of flourishing and engagement and enjoyment and buy-in and hope, something's missing. And so they come to me and they tour what we do, or they see my work and they say, okay, how can I close that gap? So that's kind of that first step of they themselves. Sometimes it's though the educator, the teacher who comes across whatever I'm doing and says, can you help talk to my administration about this? Because they're not quite getting it. And so that's a little bit of a nuanced conversation to have. But primarily the work I do is with school leaders. And with school leaders, my work is to say, okay, I know that you are here because you want the students in your care to flourish, to thrive, to be healthy, to be whole. To do that, you need the educators in your care to flourish and thrive and be healthy and be whole. So then who's doing that for you, the school leader? And the real answer to that is not nobody. There's not really anybody. It's really hard to be vulnerable with your staff. It's hard to be vulnerable with parents, et cetera. So there's nobody really that's helping them. And so that's where the work that I do with school leaders is to say, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in the cohort that I lead that meets once a month, the real work that I do is to say, okay, how can I help pour into you? How can I make sure that you are flourishing and thriving? So that I think about, again, I talk about the ecosystem. If a school is a tree, the leaders are those deeply rooted parts of it that are feeding life into the whole. But if they themselves are withering, if they're not flourishing and thriving, they can't feed that up to the leadership team, who feeds it out to the faculty, who feeds it to the students and families. So the work I do is to really make sure that leaders feel and have the support, have the resources, have what they need to flourish and thrive so that they can spread that. Because I feel like, Marnie, I think you and I talked about this, if I can work with one school leader, I might be impacting 2,000 people in that school. So typically, to answer your question, it's somehow somebody's intersected with what I'm doing in the work of education and flourishing and saying, I want that at my place.
So I want to circle back to something, because I know we're going to get this question because we have a lot of parents that listen to our podcast. And I want to circle back to something around what you said earlier, Scott, about the whole notion of grades and how they lead to anxiety. And I forget exactly the exact chain of words that you used there. But I know we're going to get the question, which is, okay, if they're not dealing with that anxiety when they're younger, in grades K through 12, ultimately they're going to have to deal with that anxiety when they leave. What is your response to that?
Are you asking me, just to make sure I understand the question, Nick, are you asking me about the anxiety piece?
Or just in general, that specifically, yes, around the...
Well, so I hear that question rooted, I hear what you're asking under the umbrella of resilience. How do we help shape really resilient human beings?
Yeah.
So yes, we have taken GPA and numbers and letters out of the equation, but what we put in is a high level of what we call learner-led engagement. So our students aren't just taking classes. Our students come to us and say, I want to teach entomology. I want to teach architectural engineering design. Or what they really say is, I'm passionate about bugs. I'm passionate about architectural design. I'm passionate about fashion. And we've created an infrastructure, an ecosystem where then our response to that is, okay, how are you going to walk that out in this community? Which then leads to students, primarily seniors, teaching classes in those lines. Inside each class, each student is responsible for becoming a scholar, an innovator, a researcher, a designer in whatever the field is. So they've got a pretty significant thesis paper they have to do in every class: math, science, literature, history, et cetera. Where we do a celebrations of learning at the end of every quarter. So our students are putting together some kind of celebration piece: art, fashion, photography, woodworking, sculpting, all kind of beautiful things, spoken word, original music. So they're literally creating the learning that surrounds the environment. So they're with us creating all this learning. So all that to say, what we're building in them is a resilience to operate in a world where innovation and growth mindset and design thinking and creativity, those are the coins of the realm that the world that is being shaped around us, certainly by technological advances, artificial intelligence, et cetera, meaning making, that is the great Jedi superpower of this world we're entering into now. I read this great article by Dan Coe talking about that. It said, we have 36 months to make it. And I responded with an article from my newsletter. Schools have 36 months to make it, centered in the idea that making it is pursuing meaning. So to answer your question, Nick, what we're doing is saying, okay, we're actually kind of going to ramp up the expectations. You're not just going to do worksheets and quizzes. You're going to create learning. You're going to give presentations. You're going to write thesis papers. You're going to present in front of an audience of about 200 people at our celebrations of learning. So we're going to ramp up the expectations. We're going to ramp up the support, and we're going to be there to help you through that process. But that creates in them the resiliency, also the optimism, also just those hard tactile skills. Let me give you a perfect example of that. Algebra class, right? You go to algebra class at Name Your School. You're going to sit in a desk in a row. You're going to do worksheets and quizzes and tests, and you're going to get a grade at the end. You're going to walk out the door. Maybe you say that was great. Might say, when am I ever going to use this, right? So we created our math class was our students built a tiny home from the trailer up. So somebody donated a trailer. We worked with a tiny home builder. We did the math stuff in class, but then I think 2 days a week, and then in the afternoons, and then they gave up their Thanksgiving break, et cetera, to go build this tiny home. So they were framing it. They were working with an electrical engineer on the wiring, paint, but they also did marketing. We did sales, publicity. We had literally articles all across the world about it. Somebody actually bought it and is living it in Odessa, Texas. So that's kind of amping, like they're not just doing worksheets and quizzes. Yeah. I mean, they're doing mathematics. And I can talk to you right now. We have a botany class called Living Systems. This morning, they were at an edible food garden in a food desert in Oklahoma City that has fresh tomatoes and lettuce and onions and stuff for the population that can't just go into a given store and get it. So that's how they're putting that to work. So they're learning innovation, they're learning creativity, they're learning growth mindset, but they're also learning that resilience so that when they go out into the world, whatever they face, whether it's college, whether it's life, career, family, whatever it is, our students have those intrinsic qualities of resilience, of hope, of gratitude, of belief in their own self, of agency. I mean, that's what I would tell your parents, is just take a look at what our students are doing in the world.
Yeah, excellent.
I'm curious how many of them turn into entrepreneurs because they've been given such agency.
No, it's a great
How many
question.
of them find like, all right, I really don't want to work for somebody else.
Yeah, a lot for sure. And so we have people who are doing beautiful work in city planning, beautiful work in working with battered women, working in some battered women's shelters, people who are working in orphanages in the Honduras, people who are doing food sustainability in Colorado. So a lot of them do videography work, filmmaking work, fashion design work. We have a movie star. She was the Violet, I think, in the Loud House Nickelodeon movies. And so, I mean, we definitely have students who are doing the college thing and are getting presidents and deans and chancellors scholarships to Vanderbilt and Chicago and NYU and all those great places. But yeah, we have students who open up their own welding shop, tattoo artists. So most importantly for us, again, it's not like where you land. It's, are you the most flourishing, robust, thriving version of yourself in whatever field you go into?
So for those that are listening to this and they wanted to find out more about Odyssey Leadership Academy and just to check it out, because it sounds fascinating, right? And I think a lot of people most people are not exposed to that type of education. Where do they look? Where can they find out more?
Yeah, so the first place and the best place is our website, which is just odysseyleadershipacademy.org. There's a lot of information there, videos of the work our students are doing, celebration pieces, engineering pieces they've done, spoken word, music, etc. So odysseyleadershipacademy.org. There's also a link there to our YouTube page. So again, they can see the students in their own words talking about their work, showing their work at celebrations and those kind of things.
That's awesome. We'll put that in the show notes as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before we let you go, what is one leadership rule that everybody should follow?
You have got to empower those in your care. I think leadership is from the bottom out. I think a lot of times we think about leadership in kind of this top down, well, I'm the boss, so I'm going to tell everybody what to do. To me, I think leadership is from the bottom out. Like, how do I come beside you, underneath you, lift you up, serve you, support you, believe in you, encourage you, and then just release you and come alongside and like, how do I resource you to go be your best self? I just feel like that's the difference between leadership and management.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah.
Thanks, Scott. We
it.
appreciate it. And
Yeah,
again, we'll put the links in the show notes for everybody to check it out.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you so much.